is great to be with you here today. Thank you for welcoming us to Las Vegas. We are made to feel at home, welcomed by incredibly kind, generous people who are putting this country first. Now there is an intolerance and a racism and a lack of civility that has been unleashed on this country by one of the most racist, uncivil presidents we have ever had. The way to meet that challenge is not to succumb to the pettiness, to the smallness, to the intolerance. The way to meet that is to ensure that we elevate every single American, regardless of whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, no matter to who you play, where you are from, or who you love. All that matters now is that we are Americans, we are human beings, and we have the chance to make sure that this country fulfills its purpose for each and every single one of us. Are you with me? Well, I am with you, and it is all of us together for this country. Thank you for having us out here today. I am grateful, and we're going to head inside. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us out. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I got it. All right, look this way. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. She's introducing me so much.
Nice to see you.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Here we go. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming. Appreciate it. Don't disappoint us.
I won't. Thank you. Go for it.
Yeah, so pass and pray.
Go up,
Great fight out.
Can I get a picture?
¿Cómo estamos? Me da mucho gusto estar aquí con ustedes. Gracias por venir y estar y recibir nosotros. Le agradezco. Such an honor to be here with you today. Our thanks to Max and Taylor and others who helped to organize this meeting. To the great folks at Pour Coffee for hosting us here. Thank you. I promise to personally clean your counter before I leave, okay? And to each of you who has taken out a little bit of time from your life, sometimes away from your families, from your job, from your schooling and education, to spend some time with us, not for a candidate, not for a political party, but for our democracy, for this country at this defining moment of truth and a test unlike any other. If we are going to meet the challenges of this country, of the intolerance that we see outside, folks who do not want us to be able to peacefully listen to and talk with one another, if we're going to make sure that at this deeply divided, highly polarized, hyper-partisan moment, that this country comes together on common ground and for common cause, for the common good of every single one of us, if we want to ensure that every American can see a doctor, take their child to a therapist, afford their medication, so that they are well enough to learn, well enough to work, well enough to start a business, or pay taxes, or write a poem, or create art, or raise a family, and do whatever they are supposed to do in their lives. And we want to make sure that in a country that has 11 million people living in the shadows, More than 1 million of them we call dreamers who have come to this country, have contributed to our success. If we want to make sure that we forever free those dreamers from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens here in their country of choice. If we want to know that in the time left to us, 12 years and counting, to meet the existential challenge of climate change before it consumes the human race, that after 1980 we have warmed 1 degree Celsius alone, thanks not only to our own emissions and excesses, but our own inaction. If we want to find the political will to harness the ingenuity, the creativity, the resolve, the determination of every single one of us and convene the countries of the world around this shared problem while there is still time to do so, then we need to not bring each other down, diminish one another, vilify and demonize and denigrate. We must lift each other up, expect to find the absolute best in every single one of us. No me importa if you are a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. I care not who you love, to whom you pray, whether you pray at all, how many generations you can count yourself an American, or whether you just got here yesterday. All that matters is that we are here today, now. Si queremos enfrentar los retos del cambio climático, cuidado de salud y la reforma migratoria, necesitamos una democracia en donde cada persona, cada voz y cada voto podemos contar en una economía donde cada persona en cualquier parte de este país puede esperar el éxito para su mismo y también sus hijos. If we're going to be up to these challenges, this democracy has to work. It has to count every vote, and it has to count people more than it counts corporations or special interests. And if we have any prospect of a political democracy, we must have something approaching an economic democracy. The concentration of wealth and power and privilege that we have in this country is unprecedented in our lifetimes. We have to make sure that each of us, and especially each one of our children, sees a future here. As you in Las Vegas and Nevada have taught me to say, one job should be enough. If you are teaching school, I don't want you working a second or a third job just to make ends meet. I want you not only to be earning at a minimum $15 an hour, not only to have guaranteed high quality universal health care for everyone. I want to make sure that we have paid family leave, that child care is affordable, that going to college does not put you into debt that you can never get out from under. And I want to ensure that institutions in this country are not set up against you solely based on the color of your skin. This country has the largest prison population per capita on the planet, disproportionately comprised of people of color, too many doing time for a non-violent drug crime, who upon release will be forced to check a box on any employment application form, unable to qualify for federally financed student loans to better themselves, consigning them to a dimmer future, more narrowed options, the inability to access the success that too many others take for granted. When we talk about criminal justice reform, let's ensure that no man, no woman, no corporation, no special interest is above or below the law. Let's end federally the prohibition on marijuana and expunge. And considering who we are locking up for possession of a substance that is legal in more than half the states of this country, let us expunge the arrest records of every single person arrested for possession. In order to meet these challenges, with all of us, you cannot be too rural, too red, too urban, or too blue to count. I don't care if you can vote. I don't care if you're too young. I don't care if your criminal background or your status in this country prevents you from accessing the ballot box. The fact that you are here, that you're in our country, that you're a fellow American is all that matters at this defining moment of truth. And it is why I am running to serve you as the next president of the United States of America. Thank you for having us out. And this is what we're gonna do. I have no hope of earning your vote, of prevailing in this state, of being your nominee, of delivering once in that position of public trust, unless I have first had the chance to listen to you, to see things from your perspective, to be held accountable by those who will decide this next election. So we have another microphone. We will pass this microphone to anyone who would like to ask a question, offer a suggestion, give us an idea, some guidance to make sure that we leave this meeting a better candidate, a better contender, and I hope a better servant to you going forward. Thank you for having us out here today. We are very, very, very grateful.
Okay, we have our first question right over here. Hello, Beto. My name is Natalie, and first of all, I want to thank you for coming, and also thank you for something really personal. My mom has been a resident in the United States for 20 years, and because of you, she's now seeking her citizenship.
Awesome.
So my question relates to immigration. How would you break down the barriers and provide a pathway of citizenship for people like my mom?
Yeah. So the question is, how do we break down the barriers and ensure that those who are already in this country, very often working the toughest jobs, and if we're honest with ourselves, all too often working a job that no one born in this country would be willing to do, sometimes if they are lucky, earning a minimum wage, which in my state is $7.25 an hour, far too often their immigration status used against them, kept in modern day bondage, making much less than that, never free from their employer. When we talk about immigrants as rapists and criminals, when we talk about Muslims as being too dangerous to allow into this country, even though we are a country of asylum seekers and refugees and immigrants and every tradition of faith under the planet, when we describe Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists as very fine people, bad things follow. We take kids from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border because we have described asylum seekers as an infestation. Those are the words of our president, words that I might expect to hear from the leader of the Third Reich, not the United States of America, about another human being. Taking those kids from their parents at their most desperate and vulnerable moment after they have survived a 2,000-mile journey the length of Mexico on foot atop a train known as La Bestia. Putting those kids in a cage after you've deported mom back to the very country from which she has fled. This follows our intolerance, the racism in our language and in our rhetoric, and someone in the highest position of power in this land who has abused that power, sought to divide us, to stoke paranoia and fear and anxiety for very predictable results. The day on which President Trump signed his executive order seeking to ban Muslim travel to the U.S. In Victoria, Texas, someone burned down the mosque in that community. Hate crimes are up every single year in this country for the last 3 years and counting. There are real consequences to our actions. If instead we talk about people with the dignity and respect that they are owed, not just as Americans, but as human beings, when we tell our story, that El Paso, Texas, my hometown, is one of the safest cities in America, not in spite of, but because it is a city of immigrants. A quarter of those I live with, born in another country, chose us, came to Ciudad Juarez, then El Paso, the largest binational community in the hemisphere, and their very presence is what makes us strong and successful and safe. It is not walls, it is not militarization, it is not deportations. When we begin with that context and the understanding that we are a people of the planet who have become the indispensable nation on the planet, then the policies follow, of making dreamers citizens, doing it not at the price of their parents, the original dreamers, ensuring that their status is fixed in this country as well, and then affording millions of our fellow Americans the opportunity to come out of the shadows, to contribute to their maximum potential, not only to their benefit, but the benefit of this entire country. Together, we can do this and make it happen. Thank you for sharing this story. Hey.
So, my name is Alyssa, and I'm 18 years old, and I'm about to graduate high school. And our education system in America, especially in Nevada, is really, really bad. And I would really like to see it be improved. So, how would you make sure that our education gets more advanced and we're able to keep learning?
The parents.
Yeah, Alyssa.
Alyssa asks about our public education system. These heroic public school educators, the teachers in the classroom, the therapists, the nurses, the counselors, the cafeteria workers, the school bus drivers, the custodians. In Nevada, 1/3 of them are working a second or even a third job. In Texas, it is half of our public school educators are working more than one job. When they have the most important job in front of them in that classroom, unlocking that child's lifelong love of learning, if we are successful there, there's no stopping that kid or this country. So first of all, let's pay every single public school educator a living wage so they just have one job and they're focused on that job. Second, let's acknowledge two hard truths. One, first day of kindergarten, many children are already 10 months back in reading comprehension, almost a year back in math, with no time over the course of their academic career to catch up, diminishing their prospects of graduating from high school, going on to college, being able to be a productive part of their community and provide for their family. We should also acknowledge that in that same kindergarten classroom, if you happen to be a child of color, 5 times more likely to be disciplined, suspended, or expelled as a white child in the same classroom. So if we do two things. One, make sure that school starts not at kindergarten at 5 years old, but universally in pre-kindergarten at 4 years old, so the starting line is moved out and even for every kid. Second, recruit and retain teachers who look like the students in front of them in that classroom. Third thing, understand that we have a schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline in this country that begins in that kindergarten classroom, in part a war on drugs. There's become a war on people and a war on some people over others. If we make sure that we treat our fellow Americans with the dignity that they deserve, including the most vulnerable and the youngest, if we set expectations that are the greatest for anybody anywhere in the planet, I guarantee you, if we pay the resources, if we have the accountability, if we set this goal, we will absolutely achieve it. And then higher education for everyone graduating from high school should not be out of reach in a country that has $1.5 trillion in debt, free community college, no debt public universities, and ensuring that everybody who wants to join an apprenticeship at any union to be able to learn a trade or a skill that will allow them to command a living wage is able to do it in this country. All of this can be part of a successful educational system. Thank you, Alyssa.
Hi, Congressman. My name is John. I have a question about healthcare. Sorry. Most of the industrialized world has universal coverage. Is there a particular country that you would want us to emulate their system?
So the question is about getting to guaranteed, high-quality, universal health care. There are as many models to do this as there are countries that have universal care on the planet. I think each one of them is worth looking at, understanding, taking the best from, and learning lessons from where they have failed. But I am convinced that this will be a uniquely American project, will not be done by half measure or half the country, cannot be imposed by the Democratic Party, must bring in everyone that we can to make sure that everyone is covered. There's a proposal right now in the House of Representatives written by two of my former colleagues, Jan Schakowsky of Illinois and Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, called Medicare for America. Here's what it does. If your employer or your union currently provides health care that you like. You like your provider, you like your network, keep it. If you do not like the insurance that you have, the deductible is too great, the premiums are too high, the copay unaffordable, you are enrolled in Medicare. If you're one of our millions of fellow Americans who have no health care today, you are enrolled in Medicare. This, to me, is the surest, fastest way to get everyone in this country signed up, able to afford to see a doctor, and well enough to pursue their full potential. But whatever the solution is, we've got to make sure that we bring everyone in this country along, listen to every community, show up for everyone. That's the way that I'm going to pursue this, to make sure that we get to that goal as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Healthcare for all!
My name is Tammy Yuki. I'm gonna cry.
Nice and tight, Tammy, nice and tight.
Rhonda Hart is one of my closest friends. And you see this teacher, Mr. Kimberly. That was the worst day of my life, on the phone with Rhonda. Her calls and texts that would never come from Kimberly. And I just want you to state out loud your position on guns and keeping our children from the death penalty in their art class.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're talking about this incredibly heroic, courageous, common friend of ours named Rhonda Hart, who in the Santa Fe High School shooting in our home state of Texas lost her daughter, Kimberly, whose picture I have in my wallet. Rhonda gave it to me. I keep it and I look at it all the time. We love Kimberly's sister, Tyler, and that family who shows so much courage and generosity despite their loss. A generosity that includes standing up at meetings like these and advocating for solutions that'll save more of our fellow Americans, protect more of our children in their schools, prevent more teachers from contemplating standing between an active shooter and that child for whom she has already sacrificed so much. Universal background checks that ensure that every single American who purchases a firearm goes through the due diligence that ensures that they are going to be a danger to themselves, they're going to be a danger to somebody else, that we stop them before it is too late. In those states, Moms Demand Action have shared with me that have adopted universal background checks, we've seen a near 50% reduction in gun violence. We can extend that to the entire country. And then, if you're willing to have the courage of our convictions, defy the corporations, the special interests, the political action committees, and the NRA, then I'm convinced that we can ensure that weapons, which were designed and engineered and sold to the United States military for the express purpose of killing our fellow human beings as effectively, as efficiently, and as great a number as possible, are no longer sold into our communities and show up in our concerts, in our schools, in our churches, and in our lives. But I've got to tell you, there has been no meaningful change in this country, in our history, brought about by those in elected office. It is always forced by those who take action, who make sure that they form the public pressure that develops the political will to make the change happen. So your being here, Rhonda's activism, the fact that she's now running for office back in Texas, those moms who demand action, those young people who led the walkouts in their schools and the marches for our lives. When we finally celebrate a victory of gun sense legislation, it will be thanks to you. So thank you for being here.
Right back here, hand up right here, striped shirt, look up, come up here. I'm calling you, right there, you, turn this way. Right
Hi Congressman, thank you for being here. I just want to say, went to El Paso in January, amazing food and completely safe. I wanted to say, so my family, we're immigrants as well. We came to the United States as refugees in the 90s from Bosnia. And in Eastern Europe, there's a lot of concern right now about Russian expansion, Russian interventionism, and elections and everything else. Thank you. So I wanted to ask you, what are your plans or foreign policy stances on NATO and Russian expansion and intervention in our elections?
So the question is about Russia and some of the challenges and threats that we pose, the single greatest thing that we could do to meet the threat of Russia is to defeat Donald Trump in November of 2020. We'll soon learn what's in the Mueller report, but what we know is that this president, when he was a candidate for the office, sought to collude with a foreign power that was trying to undermine our democracy, that once in power, he sought to obstruct the investigation and the justice necessary to find out what happened, firing the principal investigator, James Comey, tweeting at his attorney general to end the investigation. But if either of those set of circumstances gives you any doubt about the threat, then I call your attention to the President of the United States standing next to the leader of the Russian Federation on a stage in Helsinki, Finland, and saying that he does not believe our country or our intelligence community, but instead he believes that man who seeks to undermine and ultimately destroy this country.
Traitor!
We've got to make sure that this is settled at the ballot box in November of 2020, that whoever our nominee is, whoever she or he may be, has our full backing and support to defeat President Trump and to hit the ground running in 2021. And to the gentleman's question, this NATO alliance, which was forged in the aftermath of our leadership and victory in World War II against Nazi Germany, whose 5th article, which means the collective defense of all members, has only been invoked once, and it was in the wake of 9/11, after this country was attacked. A president who openly calls out and calls for the rethinking and maybe abolition of that agreement, emboldening Russia after they have invaded Crimea, after they threaten our interests around the world. He is demonstrably making us less safe. He is demonstrably making Russia stronger. He is putting in jeopardy our lives in this country and the lives of our allies all over the world. So let's strengthen, not weaken, those alliances, those partnerships, our friends. Let's remember the men and women who gave their lives in this country, whether they stormed the beaches in Normandy, whether they served in our wars thereafter, who purchased this freedom, our leadership, and the indispensable role that we play on the world stage. It is time to reassert our leadership by building respect for this country, by having a leader who represents our interests and our values, including our security interests going forward. Thank you for the question.
So glad to have you in Vegas, Beto. I'm a professional musician, worked on the Strip for years. I know you have a background in that. That's great. My wife's a teacher. I've been in education 30 years. I just want to make a point. I'm very familiar with your policies. I don't have any questions about that. I just would like to see Democrats, what's the word I want to use without being vulgar, more aggressive towards, in their speeches, short, sweet, to the point, get the message in, get the message out. There was a meeting yesterday that just had a picture of Trump. It said, worst president in American history. That's it. That's all you need. Keep repeating it over and over, and you're good. But I think so many times Democrats get into this analysis beyond paralysis, and they're so complicated in their answers that nobody really, half the country doesn't know what they said. Obviously, Trump supporters, a lot of them aren't book readers, Okay, I'm generalizing somewhat, and I also like the fact that you took your buddy on that road trip. That's a Republican. I thought that was cool. I'm pro-choice, but I'm also pro-cop. Okay, I'm pro-personal responsibility, but I'm pro. I don't care what sex you are or what you do. So I do have a lot of two sides. I don't fit the checklist of a Democrat all the way down, more so than I do a Republican. But I see things on both sides that need to be addressed. So thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you for your comments. Just on this point, let's really make sure that we do not succumb to the temptation to descend into the pettiness and the meanness and the personal attacks and the name calling. Whoever you voted for last time, again, it does not matter. We're going to make sure that we focus on the future, those things that we want to achieve. In our race in Texas, we visited every one of the 254 counties of that state, not the most Republican state, not the most Republican county in the state, but the most Republican county in the United States, which voted for Trump 96% in the last election. Because everyone is deserving of our respect, of our attention, of being heard, of being fought for, of being served. When we show up literally, physically, and we show up intentionally listening to the people that we want to represent or serve, we stand a chance of earning their votes and being able to deliver for them. Now, we didn't win the race, lost by 2.6%, but we helped many others get across the line. We put Texas in contention. We went from being the 50th state in voter turnout to having a 500% increase in young voter turnout. And I know if we run that way here in Nevada, if we run that way in every single state in the country, then we have a chance to do this, to do it the right way, and not only defeat him, but to make sure that we have the people, the movement, the country behind us to get the job done on day one. Thank you for the question.
Okay, I have time for 3 more. Hola, Beto. Buena, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, ¿y usted?
Qué bueno.
Muy recio.
The reason I came, my friend over there, we came to see you today. Thank you for responding to my question. I'm very nervous. Sorry.
I'm gonna hold on.
Take your time.
Reason I read are college students from UNLV. We recently went to a trip in San Diego where we were working with Border Angels, Education Without Borders in San Diego, and we even participated in a water drop in the desert. Mi pregunta es, ¿cómo piensas ayudar a los Dreamers en los Estados Unidos? Específicamente, aparte de ofrecer una amnistía.
Sí.
Gracias.
Gracias para su pregunta. Y quiero responder que yo pienso que es importante que ofrecemos ciudadanía a cada soñadora o dreamer adentro de los Estados Unidos para que ellos puedan contribuir a su máximo al futuro y al éxito de esta comunidad de Las Vegas, a mi comunidad de El Paso y también de los Estados Unidos. Pero en este tema de un muro, ¿y qué estás haciendo? These water drops that you were a part of along the desert, I want you all to understand that in the second year of the George W. Bush administration, there were 1.6 million apprehensions at our border with Mexico. Last year, there were 400,000. So 1.6 million down to 400,000. Many of them families, kids without families. What would compel you to send your 12-year-old girl on a 2,000-mile journey in the hands of a coyote, or maybe just by herself, unless things were so bad and so deadly you had no other choice? And that's exactly what is going on right now. The wall, and there are already 600 miles of it, a wall that was voted for, by the way, by Democratic senators in 2006, including Senators Clinton and Obama. A wall that forces us to take private property from our fellow Americans. A wall that will not be built on the international boundary, which is the center line of the Rio Grande River Channel, but miles into the interior of the United States. That wall is responsible for the deaths of thousands of human beings. They're not in cages, they're not separated, they're not deported, they're not awaiting deportation. They are dead. And they are kids, and they are women, and they are men, and they are human beings fleeing death and finding death here in this country. A wall is a waste of money. A wall is unnecessary. A wall makes us less, not more safe. And a wall is inhumane. That is why I support Citizenship for Dreamers and oppose a wall in any form that it takes. Thank you.
All right, I have my last 3.
Hi, my name's Caitlin. I'm a local here in Vegas. I just want to first say thank you. My father was a Democrat and he was really excited about this next election. He sadly passed away in February. But you give me a lot of hope for the future of this country and what he wanted. But what I wanted to ask is, I'm a student journalist currently, a senior in high school. And the last year I've seen the media come under a lot of attack by the current president. And I wanted to know how you were going to maintain a good relationship with the media.
Thank you. So Caitlin, for those who could not hear, is a student journalist, wants to know more about how I would have a relationship with the media, or maybe how I do right now. Also shared with us the passing of your father. I think I speak for everyone in telling you that we are sorry for your loss, but I can tell from knowing you for all of 30 seconds that you're making him proud wherever he is right now, and we wish you the most success in your career. This democracy, 243 years in, the absolute exception in world history. There's nothing that guarantees us another 243 years or even another year. The institutions that we have, the integrity and sanctity of the ballot box, an independent judiciary, and yes, a free press that holds people like me to account, that helps everyone make informed decisions at the ballot boxes, or know how your money is being spent, or by whose interest your money is being spent, is foundational to this country's success and to this country's future. A president who describes the press as the enemy of the people, who encourages violence against members of the press, with predictable results being there is violence perpetrated against members of the press in this country. That president who attacks the judiciary demeans a Mexican-American judge born in Indiana because of his ethnicity, who invites further attacks on our democracy in the ballot box from the single greatest threat that we have on the planet. This president and his administration alone could be this democracy's undoing. It is time that we all do everything we can to support these institutions on whom our future rests, and that includes the press. We may not always like their questions, I know from personal experience, or the conclusions that they draw in their articles, but they are absolutely fundamental, not just to our ability to get our message out to potential supporters, but fundamental to the success of this democracy. As a member of Congress for 6 years, I had access to intelligence briefings in classified settings in the wake of Russia's attack on our democracy. Having been briefed by the director of the CIA and the FBI, Department of Justice, I learned more from reading the Washington Post and reading the New York Times than I did in those briefings. The press and our media and those who sacrifice their time and other options they may have in life to make sure that they get the truth to the rest of us are our heroes, not our enemies. They are the best defense against tyranny going forward. So we thank you, Caitlin, for your choice. Thank you.
I'm so kind of nervous. Like, I love you.
You're good.
So, the UN scientists say that in 10 years, the effects of climate change are going to be irreversible. What are your thoughts or plans on climate change?
Yeah, so thank you. The questions about climate change. What's that? No nuclear storage at Yucca Mountain to satisfy my question. But on this question of climate change and the fact that we've warmed 1 degree over pre-industrial revolution levels just since 1980, and we are slated to warm more than 1 degree Celsius going forward on this current trajectory unless we change course and unless we take very bold action. The wildfires in California, the flooding of the Missouri River in Nebraska and Iowa, the 58 inches of rain that fell from the sky on Houston, Texas, the landfall record for as long as we've been keeping records in North America, the third 500-year flood in that community in just 5 years, the droughts through which our farmers persist, but after a while they will no longer be able to grow the food and fiber that feeds and clothes so much of the rest of the world. The civil war in Syria that followed the longest, most profound, sustained droughts in Syria. The crisis, the deaths, the refugee flows that we are seeing now are nothing compared to what our kids and their kids will see if we do not use every minute of the 12 years the scientists say is left to us to take action. That means, as quickly as possible, converting from a carbon and fossil fuel and greenhouse emitting economy, seizing the opportunity to lead in wind and solar and biofuels, following your lead on investing in battery technology to store the energy that we produce, and understanding, as the Green New Deal does, that you cannot separate our climate challenges and opportunities from our economic challenges and opportunities, the two fastest growing jobs in the United States of America today are wind energy jobs and solar energy jobs. Let's understand that there is economic opportunity, job growth opportunity, high value, high skill, high wage, in demand jobs that we are creating, and we can create more of them if we speed this transition. And then, as the one country of the 194 on the planet that has decided to drop out of its responsibilities in the Paris Climate Agreement, as president, I will sign the United States back up. I will ensure that we convene the countries of the world around this shared challenge and reassert our indispensable role of bringing the world together around otherwise intractable problems. I want to make sure that when we had this moment of truth, we were not found wanting. And given your question and the leadership that I see, especially amongst young people on this issue, I know that we will be good. So thank you. Thanks for being here.
This is our last question.
Hi, Beto. I'm like super nervous, so I'm sorry if my voice is super raspy. But my name's Akaya. I'm 16 years old. I'm a student at Basic Academy here. And I know you mentioned you don't care whether or not you're able to vote, you're not able to vote, you don't care about age. And so for me personally, I grew up with politics. I grew up being engaged in politics, watching the news because of my grandparents. And so I know there's other politicians that have entered the race or thinking about entering the race that are debating on changing the voting age from 18 to 16. I don't necessarily have a stance on it because I know that there are students that aren't as involved as I am. I know there's students that are. So I would just like to know your opinion on that and where you stand. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Question is on changing the voting age. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to this because on the issues that we are talking about, climate change, gun violence, healthcare for all, true, meaningful criminal justice reform in the United States of America, I find so often it is the very youngest among us who are leading those efforts. I was just in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and I met a surviving member of the Friendship Nine. So back in 1961, he and 8 of his fellow students, young people, sat at a lunch counter, a segregated lunch counter, knowing full well that they would be humiliated in front of their fellow citizens. They would be dragged out of their chairs, off their stools, into jail, where they refused to post bail. Stayed in jail for 30 days, helped to galvanize the conscience of this country, much in the same way that the Greensboro Four did in North Carolina, much in the same way that the Freedom Riders who took their lives into their hands, riding Greyhound buses throughout the Deep South, having the audacity to drink from the water fountain of their choice, go to the bathroom of their choosing, those who joined John Lewis across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, those who lost their lives for civil rights, for not just themselves or those who look like them, but for every single American. Show me that young people are not the leaders of tomorrow. Young people are the leaders of this moment, right now, today. So, I'm very open to the idea of expanding the electorate by moving the voting age down to ensure that we capture that energy, that enthusiasm, that leadership, and that desire to participate in our democracy. Thank you for asking the question. Really appreciate it. That's it. Okay, Cynthia is saying that was our last question. Thank you for having us out here today. Pour coffee, thank you for allowing me to stand on your counter and hosting all of us.